In the early hours of January 17, 1991, an Iraqi radar station in southern Iraq was quietly watching the direction of the Saudi Arabian border. Nothing appeared on the screen. The desert was dark, and only a low static noise came through the radio. The Iraqi army believed it was ready. They had occupied Kuwait, dug trenches, and positioned tanks and anti-aircraft guns. If America came, they believed they could make it bleed in the desert. But there was one thing they did not understand. War does not begin when tanks cross a border. In modern war, it begins the moment the enemy can no longer see you. That morning, somewhere beyond their sight, the American war machine was already moving. Stealth aircraft, attack helicopters, cruise missiles, electronic warfare aircraft, aerial refueling tankers, satellite communications. Each seemed to move separately, but in reality, they were part of one massive system. And seconds later, the area around the radar station exploded. The screen went dark, and communication was cut. The first thing Iraq lost was not soldiers, it was its eyes. Operation Desert Storm had begun. This is DWS, where we bring the most decisive battles in history back to life. If you enjoy stories like this, stay with us until the end. To understand Operation Desert Storm, we have to go back to August 2nd, 1990, when Iraq invaded Kuwait. On a map, Kuwait looked like a small country, but it was an oil-rich nation positioned at the entrance of the Persian Gulf, and it was far too important to the global flow of energy to be ignored. Saddam Hussein made his calculation. The Iraqi army had fought an 8-year war against Iran. It had combat experience, large armored formations, artillery, and air defense systems. Saddam believed the United States would not want another long war in the deserts of the Middle East. The memory of Vietnam, the fear of American casualties, and the complexity of international politics would make Washington hesitate. He believed that if Iraq swallowed Kuwait and simply held on, the world would eventually accept it. But that calculation missed one decisive point. The U.S. military of 1991 was not the same military of the past. This war would not be fought by troop numbers alone. It would be a new kind of war, built on logistics, satellites, aerial refueling, electronic warfare, and precision strikes working together as one. The Iraqi army was waiting for America in the desert, but America was not coming in the way Iraq understood. While Iraqi forces were digging defensive lines into the sands of Kuwait, something very different was happening to the south. The United States did not attack immediately. First, it launched Operation Desert Shield to defend Saudi Arabia, and behind that shield, it prepared the sword. Aircraft carriers moved into the Gulf. Fighters, bombers, aerial refueling tankers, and electronic warfare aircraft poured into regional bases. Transport ships carried tanks, armored vehicles, ammunition, and fuel without pause. Soldiers arrived in the desert. Communication networks were connected, and command centers began to function like one massive nervous system. Iraq was watching the border in front of it, but America was watching the entire map. Which radar site to cut first? Which command center to strike first? Which enemy unit to isolate first? All of it was already being calculated. The war had not yet begun, but across the desert, the machine of victory was already being assembled in silence. Saddam Hussein believed America could not move easily, but America was not hesitating. It was preparing the most overwhelming first strike possible. And then, in the early hours of January 17, 1991, the first blade moved through the darkness of the desert. The American attack did not begin with a massive bombing raid. First came a silent infiltration. Attack helicopters flew low toward Iraqi early warning radar sites. Iraqi radar operators watched their screens, but nothing appeared, because the Americans were approaching in a way they could not see. Seconds later, explosions erupted. Radar facilities collapsed. Communication lines were cut, and the first hole opened in Iraq's air defense network. Through that hole, a much larger wave began to surge forward. Cruise missiles cut through the darkness, and stealth aircraft pushed deep toward Baghdad. Before Iraqi commanders could even fully report that the war had begun, they were already losing parts of the battlefield. This was the new kind of war that Desert Storm revealed. It did not begin by destroying enemy soldiers first. It began by cutting away the enemy's ability to see, hear, and command. That morning, Iraq did not simply lose the sky. It first lost the eyes that allowed it to see the sky. That night, the sky over Baghdad was covered in fire. Iraqi anti-aircraft guns fired wildly into the darkness. Red tracer rounds tore across the night, and explosions shook the city. From the outside, it looked as if the Iraqi army was fighting back. But the real problem was that they did not know exactly what they were shooting at. American forces were already moving through the gaps in Iraq's radar and communications network. Stealth aircraft penetrated deep into the most protected areas, targeting command posts and communication facilities. Cruise missiles flew toward fixed coordinates. The Iraqi army fired into the sky. But firing into the sky only cut through empty air. The Americans fired at targets, and that difference changed the course of the war. The explosions were loud, but the operation was cold. Each time an air defense site went silent, each time a command post stopped responding, each time a communication line was cut, the Iraqi army was pushed deeper into darkness. Saddam Hussein's army still had tanks and artillery. Its soldiers were still in their trenches, but the eyes, ears, and nervous system needed to move that army were being cut apart one by one. The night over Baghdad was not just an air raid. It was the moment a nation's army began losing its ability to command a war. But Saddam Hussein believed Iraq still had a card that could shake the war in another direction. That card was the Scud missile. Iraq launched missiles toward Saudi Arabia and Israel. Militarily, they were not enough to stop the American air campaign. But politically, there was a dangerous calculation behind them. If Israel struck back, the Arab nations fighting alongside the United States might begin to fracture. Saddam was trying to expand the battlefield. He wanted to drag America's cold, precise operation into the anger and chaos of the wider Middle East. Night after night, sirens sounded, and civilians ran for shelters. Patriot missiles launched into the sky, and American aircraft searched the desert for mobile launchers. But the center of the war did not change. Under American pressure and diplomacy, Israel held back, and the coalition did not break. The Scud was a weapon of fear, but it could not reverse the momentum. Iraq tried to shake America, but America moved faster. It launched more reconnaissance aircraft, tracked more targets, and tightened its control of the sky. Saddam Hussein's counterstrike was a gamble to expand the war, but Operation Desert Storm had already become too large of a system. It was not a storm that could be stopped by one or two missiles. Then, at last, on February 24th, 1991, the ground war began. The Iraqi army, confident in ground combat, had been waiting for this moment. It had dug trenches south of Kuwait, laid mines, and positioned tanks and artillery. If the Americans pushed straight north, Iraq believed a bloody war of attrition would begin. The desert could become a massive trap. But the Americans did not come down the road Iraq had been waiting for. While part of the coalition pressured the front, the main force moved far to the west, sweeping through the desert in a wide arc. Across the vast empty terrain, tanks, armored vehicles, and supply convoys surged north. While Iraq looked south, the war opened on its flank. This was the heart of the Desert Storm ground campaign. America chose not a frontal collision, but maneuver and encirclement. Blinded and disoriented by the air campaign, Iraqi forces could not properly understand where the main American force was or how fast it was moving. Orders came late, communication was unreliable, and coalition aircraft kept pressing from above. The Iraqi army was waiting for the enemy, but America did not enter the battlefield Iraq had prepared. America was creating a new battlefield. Once the American flanking maneuver was complete, Iraq's defensive line was no longer truly a defensive line. Trenches and minefields built to face south began to lose their meaning as coalition forces pushed in from the side and rear. Armored units moved quickly. Reconnaissance assets opened the way, and air power continued to strike units trying to flee or reorganize. On paper, the Iraqi army was still large, but war does not move by numbers alone. Communications were cut. Orders did not arrive on time, and the sky had already been lost. Units became isolated without knowing exactly where the others were. Some were surrounded before they could fight. Others collapsed while waiting for orders to retreat. The massive ground force Saddam Hussein had trusted was losing its eyes, its ears, its sky, its command, and finally the ground beneath it. The ground war had been expected to last much longer. In reality, it took less than 100 hours. In the desert, the military assumptions of an entire generation were collapsing. Operation Desert Storm was not simply a war that pushed Iraqi forces out of Kuwait. It was the moment the world first witnessed the new face of modern warfare. War was no longer decided only by the number of soldiers or the number of tanks. Victory depended on who could see first, connect first, and strike first. Iraq had many soldiers and weapons, but the United States and the coalition seized the skies, cut radar networks, paralyzed communications, broke the command structure, and then moved the ground forces. As a result, Iraq did not collapse because it had completely lost the ability to fight. It collapsed because it lost the ability to command the fight. That was the most important lesson left by Operation Desert Storm. The Iraqi army believed it was fighting the United States in the desert, but what it actually faced was not just an army. It faced a massive war system connecting the sky, satellites, communications, logistics, precision strikes, and maneuver warfare. And once that system began to move, 100 hours was enough. Thank you for watching. This is DWS. If you want more battlefield stories that changed history, please hit subscribe and give this video a like.